The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. As we'll get our starting five shout-outs going in the stream. Always watch the show. Like and subscribe to Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Twitter, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Elijah's all geared up, looking forward to the weekend. Chris Schmidt, find us on Twitter at Herbal Essence, for Elijah at Schmidt_radio to give me a follow. And we'll get busy here in just a little bit. In hour one, Brandon Vogel from Counter Read going to be with us, counterread.com. Check in with Vogue, see how his week has been. Hour two, Gary Barnett. We'll talk with Barney. He is somebody that'll bring some insight to that whole intimidation factor discussion this week, as well as some other things. So we'll check in with Coach Barnett. And then excited to talk with our friends from the Common Fan podcast. They're doing a cool series that has been something that Nebraska fans have talked a ton about over the years, the why of things gotten so sideways. This, again, just to put a qualifier out there, this isn't any insinuation on Rule and company, but the last 20 years have been a bit of a nightmare, the fall from grace. And their Reckoning series is a several-part podcast series. They're talking with different media folks and diving in. Started with Solich post Osborne era, and they're working their way all the way through the Rule promise. So we'll talk with TJ Burke. He is coming up at 5:25. Jeff Langenberg also going to join us, part of the Common Fan podcast. So excited for there. We'll get your gambling fix with Danny Burke, burksbeat.com at 5:40. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. Elijah, it is a big political night, and the debates are going on. That'll be intriguing for sure. And, you know, when we talk about Husker football debates and topics, you asked a question to me earlier, what Husker football take for 2024 is a hill you're worth dying on. We have more EA Sports buffoonery. I'll go there with some of their rankings, and this isn't anything of relevance to the intimidation thing. That can be a fluid thing. Defenses, however, are not. And your top defenses in college football have been pretty solid, a lot of the same units, some getting less love than others. What's the worst thing going on with recruiting? What's the best thing going on? So we'll talk a little recruiting and get your comments as well. How you feeling? You grilling out? Are you ordering in? Are you just drinking heavily tonight for the debates?
Well, I got the IPA stacked and ready to go. That 7% ABV might come in handy tonight. We'll see. First things first, Team USA taking on Panama tonight at 5 o'clock, which is
this soccer?
Directly in the middle of our show. Yeah, of course it is. Oh. Are you not paying attention to the news?
No, I'm not.
It's big. It's Copa America. So that game's at 5. Once you make it through that, then you can sit down.
Does the winner get a can of Copenhagen?
No.
Oh, you said Copa.
Copa, cup. Spanish for cup.
Didn't pass Spanish in high school.
Did you not? I thought you did. I thought you were.
I did in college.
Okay. I was gonna say I thought you had a baseline. I thought you were like me that like passed by the skin of your teeth and like I know the word for tree and that's about it.
I know baño, cerveza.
Yeah.
Chicas.
Cerveza is a good one to know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And baño.
Bathroom. Mm-hmm. Well, they kind of go hand in hand.
I know more swear words.
I know, like bueno. I know bueno. I wish I knew more. Something about foreign language and we just don't get along.
Gracias.
Anyway, Copa is Spanish for cup. It's the Cup of Americas. So it's all the teams from North and South America that have been essentially selected into this tournament. I guess they qualified, but selected in, and you play it out for all the bragging rights. So it's everyone in the Americas playing each other, and Team USA is playing. They won their first game against Bolivia, and they now have Panama. So should be a good one tonight. And then you get to sit down and enjoy what I'm sure will be a mess of a presidential debate tonight.
We'll see. So let's get our starting five. NU Grandpa in first. Tiger Shark Diver checks in second. KG in third. And Chopper76, good to have you. He says, I'm in. Grant Wistrom is now my most favorite Husker. Great interview. That was awesome. That is posted on the YouTube channel and also Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. If you missed Grant talking some football and, yes, medical marijuana with us yesterday at Hail Varsity. Check that out. Patrick is in. Patrick, good to have you. Thank you for checking us out. Jimmy is here. And Michael and Sal, get in. Good to have you. Anonymous. Anonymous has a thought on recruiting. As always, the Huskers are having to look for Plan B recruits, similar to when I had to change my dating strategy to give up on hussies and focus on the skanks. I have not said the word skank. Yeah. Just once and never again. Again, it wasn't my words. I was reading them.
Yeah, so was Ron Burgundy, an Anchorman.
Right?
Yeah.
Just read the teleprompter. Real Matthew is in. Listen, we'll just start here with recruiting. Ryan is in. Ryan, good to have you. Jack, good to have you. We'll keep scrolling through and take more of your comments. I'm not worried about recruiting, okay? I'm not worried about recruiting for Nebraska. They seem to have plenty of names to turn to on a board when it comes to offensive linemen. Carday Smith, just as an example. Another offer went out. He's a guy that they've studied. He's a guy that was committed to Auburn. He's decommitted. I know he's checking out USC. So the peer teams you're recruiting against right now are vastly different win-loss record than you are. And you're still in the mix there. I don't think they're settling. I don't think they're just trying to fill out a class. I don't think Matt Rule and Nebraska operate that way. Yes, you need bodies. You also have the portal. They prefer not to go portal just because it's so hard to land. And Nebraska's not been uber successful at landing portal lines of scrimmage guys. I mean, Elijah Judy is the guy that comes to my mind that they did retain and get a couple of years ago, which is great. He should have a fun year this year. He'll be big. But Nebraska, listen, they're in on Carday Smith. And Brian Tapow is he committing tonight? There's that swirling around. He decommitted last night from Oregon State.
Weird saga. Weird saga for sure.
Excuse me. Nobody in the world understood why he committed to Oregon State other than you're young and maybe you get caught up in the moment. And it's not that Oregon State's a bad football program, but all of the proven winning there is left for East Lansing. And you've got Trent Brave, former Nebraska linebackers coach, is the head man there now. But you just, with the different connections Nebraska has had with Tapow, you thought it was going to be a good deal for Nebraska. It still might be.
Well, remember what Tim said to us last week? He was like, yeah, coming out of the Nebraska visit, I was told that he was going to be committing to Nebraska following the Oregon State visit. He reaches back out to Tim just before the Oregon State visit and says, hey, I'm not going to be committing next week after all, and then commits to Oregon State on the visit. 3 days later, he decommits. Everything about this saga is weird. I don't have any inside information, and I'm not sure what led to that. The first places your mind goes would be promises that were made on a visit that very quickly become unfulfilled. It's very strange to have a guy be like, yeah, I'm all in on Nebraska, and then within 48 hours be like, you know what, never mind, that's not going to happen anymore, commit to Oregon State, and then 3 days after that, decommit. Like, something strange is going on behind the scenes here, and I don't know what that would be, but this is not a normal recruitment in any way, shape, or form.
It's not, and what you don't want are these things. You don't want to spend time and energy on somebody that will flake out on you. That's just a general thought. 2, from a promises being made on an NIL front, and I'm not saying this is Nebraska, I'm not saying this is Oregon State, I'm just saying in general, you don't want a Miami Hurricane situation where a boatload of wealth is promised and not delivered upon. You can't have that reputation as a school, and you don't hose a potential prospect. 3, settle on, and I'm too old school, right? I'm too throwback in this aspect of go work your way up the depth chart, go to work as a student, go to work as a football player, and be the best you can be and let the money take care of itself. And I know my way of thinking is way different than many others. But the first thing that can't be discussed if I'm a college football head coach and I'm recruiting is the price tag. In most instances, the price tag has to match the talent projection that I'm comfortable with. And you just can't be handing out money like it's Dumb and Dumber outside the lovely hotel. I mean, you just can't. Because what's the incentive to go be great? If you've got a fat bank account and you have a small measure of generational wealth potentially already before even hitting the weight room.
At least your 401k taken care of.
For sure, right?
Oh, that'd be nice to have. But like, that's why I'm confused what's going on here, because you don't think of Oregon State as being this team that can come in and give a 3-star offensive lineman a giant bag and convince him that he can't leave.
I think it might be more of the Polynesian connection in community. I mean, sure. I think that is it. And it's not that Nebraska doesn't not have those assets either. You do, but not comparatively speaking to Oregon State. And just from a West Coast standpoint. So who knows? We'll see what happens here. But I guess one debate, I will stand on that hill till my dying breath. This isn't for 2024, but in the world of Nebraska football, they finished number 2 and number 3 in the polls. The team I really got a chance to see while I was in college was the 1999 Huskers. I will, to my dying breath, say they were the best team in college football. They didn't get a chance to play for the championship. Texas screwed that up. And I think they could have beat Mike Vick and Virginia Tech. I think they could have beat Peter Warwick and Florida State and Chris Winkie and his 47-year-old come-over. That's my answer to your question from earlier as far as and I don't know that anyone's going to debate me on it. I'm not asking for it. But there, in my annals of Husker history, I think 1999 was the best team in college football.
I was hoping to have like a little debate here, presidential style, but I don't think I can argue with you on that one. It's a reasonable take. It's a fair take to have.
Yeah. Well, what do you got? What do you have? What do you want to lure me into a debate with you about? Were you part of the debate team ever?
I was not, actually. So that's a funny story. How I got into broadcasting originally is they went to the speech.
You just like to argue at the bar, did you?
No, they went to the speech and debate team. They were trying to start the broadcasting club up at Southeast, and they're like, "Hey, we need broadcasters and people who can go call games." And everyone in the speech and debate club was like, "Nah, it's not for me." Except my brother, who was in there, and he's like, "It's not for me, but you should really hit up my brother Elijah. You should go see if he's interested." And I remember getting a note to the office in my 4th period and being like, "Oh man, what did I do?" I get called down there, and it was all good. It was just like, "Hey, you want to try broadcasting out?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that's how I got my start in broadcasting, but not from speech and debate, sort of in a roundabout way, though. The debate I have and the hill I want to die on is that I think the Husker defense in 2024 might be more suspect in terms of depth than we are currently talking about right now. Like, I think a couple of misplaced injuries, and this gets back to a conversation I had with Jabba last week on the show. A couple of misplaced injuries can derail that defense and what they want to do. And I don't think we're talking about it enough. What are we now? A month and a half out from the season, from fall camp really getting underway. And
camp starts like July 31st.
Yeah, and then a month and a half from it being like full swing. There's the word I'm looking for. Before everything's in full swing and you're looking ahead, like there's some depth parts of that defense that really concern me and make me go, I don't think we can pin down the Husker defense in 2024 as being just as good, if not better, than what they were last year. Because I think on paper, yes, that's not an unrealistic expectation to have, but injury or two, and that defense could be in a really, really rough spot.
No, but I'll say this. You get the wrong injury at the wrong spot, you go from Michigan was pretty unique to be 7 deep on the offensive line, and they lost their stud in the Big Ten championship game at guard. They were still fine because they played 7 monsters. There's very few teams that deep with any experience. Bama would always have guys until they didn't step in. Why'd Bama lose to Georgia in the championship game? Their wide receiving core was decimated, and they had to play a lot of freshmen. The freshmen weren't ready to step up in that moment, right? So, again, it comes down to development. We'll check in with Brandon Vogel. Thanks for being here. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We'll check in with Coach Barnett here at 5. Brandon Vogel with us from Counter Read, counterread.com, and we'll talk to some of his mates from the Common Fan podcast coming up here in the 5 o'clock hour, The Reckoning. Vogues, let's start there. You've been a part of this series exploring the dip in Nebraska football, and it's been a really cool listen. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as you kind of mentioned, I know you'll talk to him coming up. The gentleman from the Common Fan podcast, which I had been on just as a media member a couple of times earlier in 2024, approached me with a summer project they wanted to work on in terms of kind of looking back at each of Nebraska's coaching changes post Osborne, to kind of poke through them and prod at them and take a really deep look and see what they can tell us about Nebraska football and kind of where it's at in today's game. And I'll have to admit, that may not sound like the funnest project or the most fun listen if you're a Nebraska fan who's already lived all that stuff, but I really enjoyed kind of taking a look back at all of these with fresh eyes and taking a look at, okay, you know, Frank Solich, did Nebraska make the right call there? I mean, I think we felt I know I did, felt a certain way about that in 2003 and feel a different way, you know, in 2024. So it's been good so far. The Solich and Callahan episodes are out, and we'll keep working through them one a week from there. So you can check that out at the Common Fan podcast, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brandon, to go big picture here, as you look back at the last 20 years of Nebraska football, now that you sit down and do this project and get to talk things out, I guess, in a therapy type way, are there any areas where you think that your opinion has changed or your perspective has changed in the past 20 years, where your opinion now on an event or a subject has changed since your thoughts on the time, whether that be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever that may have been?
Yeah, I mean, the big one was probably Solich. You know, at the time Nebraska made that move, I was 23, 24, and I could kind of see like the line that Steve Peterson was selling. You know, about recruiting, about not going to let the Big 12 be. We're not going to concede the Big 12 to Texas and Oklahoma, and not going to let this program gravitate towards mediocrity. Okay, yeah, I could kind of see all that. I probably saw it more at the time. You know, when we went back and went through with the podcast that we did on that one, it's pretty tough. It's a pretty big, bold move by Peterson to, after Solich had made some staff changes, brought in Bo Pelini as well as a handful of others, and the record got better. You know, they went 9-3. To make that firing then, that one seems a little bit hasty in a way I didn't feel at the time. the Callahan episode, which is the episode that's the most recent episode that's out there. That's an interesting one too. Like they were close. I thought in year 2 and then definitely in year 3, and then the bottom just fell out in year 4. And what do you do there? I think big picture wise, like it's not just the coaching changes that jump out to me through all of this. It's how many ADs Nebraska went through during that time as well. And it just seemed like, you never quite had the alignment of an AD who was like, 3 of their ADs had to come in and basically have a decision on, do we keep the coach or do we fire him within their first year on the job. That's not a recipe for success.
Vogues, do you think Nebraska will be immune from having the bottom fall out again? And if so, say Nebraska just starts being consistent, and consistent means you're at that 7 to 9 window in a tougher Big Ten. Say that consistency means, listen, the reality is your schedule is going to be much tougher year in, year out. Could be really, really tough. As long as Nebraska doesn't get embarrassed and they get a big win pelt on the wall once a year, do you think the fan base is a little more forgiving now? Or do you think it's ramped up even more because you're on coach number 5 or 6, depending on an AD number 38?
Yeah. I think they'll be a little more forgiving based on the past 20 years of Nebraska football, but ultimately, I don't think any program's immune from the bottom falling out, because it's just human nature to aspire to more. So right now, if you could poll the fan base, you'd probably find a majority of people would be like, yeah, and we've heard this in years past, going back of like, if Nebraska just had kind of Iowa, Wisconsin level of success right now, like people would be happy with that. Sure, they would for a while. But it kind of had that under Bo Pelini, and eventually, it becomes like, well, can we ever take the next step beyond that? And that's just how it goes. I think that's how it goes everywhere. You do something at a really pretty, like a high level for long enough. The question then, like you become defined by, okay, can it go higher? So if that's the case in college athletics, and I think that it is, no, the bottom can always find out, because you're one coaching decision away from kind of undoing whatever you've earned to that point.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. Counterread.com is where you find his work. Subscribe to his newsletter as well, discussing the work he's been doing on the new Common Fan podcast. We'll be talking with those guys here a little bit later in the show, about 5:25. And Brandon, to kind of tie that podcast with today's rebuild, Husker football, Matt Rule, what type of scar tissue do you think Matt Rule, now that he's made it through a year, still has to work with at Nebraska, whether that be among the fan base, through the athletic department? Do you see any scar tissue there that has been left by the last 20 years that changes how Matt Rule has to approach this rebuild?
Yeah, I don't think there's much you have to worry about with the fan base. Like, if it's human nature to kind of always want to aspire to more, I think it's also human nature to want to view something you care about in the best possible light, and that is Nebraska's 2024 offseason. Like, there are legitimate reasons to be bullish about Nebraska, and we're seeing it as we kind of get deeper into summer and more of the preseason polls, preseason magazines come out. So I think that part's good. You had another surprise AD change. Like, there's no alarm bells with that yet, other than, you have an AD that didn't hire Matt Rule. So, I think there's some potential there, like, depending on where things go. That's still there. And I think the one that you really can't get over until you actually just do it in September, October, or November is kind of getting over the hump Nebraska couldn't in November with just kind of the close losses. I know people are tired of hearing about that and talking about it all the time. I am too. But it was apparently a thing yet again in 2023, and Rule talked about that a couple of times. Like, you just got to get some of those and do it. I think that's probably the ugliest scar that's still visible on this program.
Vogue, so let's talk about what you wrote about in Counter Read, and that's the running back room. What do you think is in that room? Is there a future star? Is there a workman-like back? Is there somebody that could emerge and wow? I mean, you look at upside, you look at injury history, you look at mileage, you look at portal addition. I mean, there are some talented dudes that have all sorts of attributes to take that running back room to a place it hasn't been in 10 years, or at least since Ziggy was here, or Amir. And they're two different backs. I'm not comparing them, but they both went over 1,000 yards. You're going to need that this year for where you want to go on the offensive side.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of a tough group to handicap, sort of uniquely so. I mean, you've got a good mixture of veterans and young players. You brought in a transfer from Oregon, a highly rated 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Dowdell. So I think you've got the right mix and the right options. It's just hard to prove much about any of them at this point. Is there a future star in that room? I think the closest you might have is Gabe Ervin Jr., who's been around for a long time. But we just haven't seen him be able to play a full season yet. If you kind of look at some of his underlying numbers, not just kind of the carries and the rushing totals, I think he was a fringe, all Big Ten player a year ago, if he'd been able to play all 12 games. He was running pretty well. I think Emmett Johnson, who got 90 carries last year, is kind of, once Nebraska lost their top two and then kind of made the switch from Anthony Grant as the primary runner to Johnson over the back 6 games of the season, had a pretty good year when you really dig into it. So he's somebody who I'd probably put at 1A or 1B along with Johnson, Gabe Ervin, presuming health in that room. Dowdell's kind of a total wild card. And then Ramir Johnson, has shown in flashes that he can be a player I think you want on the field, you want to utilize.
Brandon Vogel with us here. And Brandon, given the talent that you have in that room and given the couple of years you're expected to have with a 5-star quarterback at the helm, I think it's a make or break year for E.J. Barthel to show some improvement and show some production in that running back room.
Yeah, I think it's an important one. We'll see. I think the offense will be different. You brought in Glenn Thomas, but also just a different type of quarterback. But with an experienced offensive line, and I looked at this a couple weeks back on Counter Read as well, an O-line that I think is pretty good when it comes to run blocking. That's not its question mark going into 2024. If you get the level of quarterback play, I think it's fair to presume Nebraska will, which is almost anything would be better than what they ended up with last year collectively. It should be a scenario where at least one or two of those backs can have pretty good seasons. Nebraska was really devoted to the run, even when it wasn't working all that well and everybody knew they were going to do it. So this 2024 season becomes a big one for that handoff run game.
Vogues, as we wind down, bud, we'll check in Saturday. Tell us how folks can get in touch with you and Aaron Sorensen with Counter Read.
Yep, you can just head to counterread.com. That's twice weekly Substack from myself and Aaron Sorensen. Do a couple of other free posts each week, but kind of the baseline expectation is 2 things you want to read a week for our paid subscribers, and been going strong since last August and continuing to grow with that. A lot of people saw it already, but if they didn't, Aaron Sorensen had a great story on D. Riley this week, so be sure to check that out.
Vogues, we'll talk this weekend. Thank you much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
There he is, Brandon Vogel with us. Hail Varsity continues.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel can find us on Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Hail Varsity do that and can watch the show that way. Can check us out on different platforms. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you're at. When it comes to the podcast, like and subscribe to those. The podcast on those different platforms, and give us some feedback, good, bad, or ugly. 489-1240. Hour 2, Gary Barnett, Common Fan Podcast, and then Danny Burke, burksbeat.com. Scott checks in on the stream. We were talking running backs with Vogel, and that is going to be key. Nebraska's handoff run game, not quarterback run game. And Scott says, look, my prediction by midseason, Dowdell's going to be the guy opposing teams aren't going to want to see. There's that possibility. Absolutely that possibility. And it's just been years since you've seen a balanced offense. It has just been years where you can throw the football when you got to throw the football, and damn it, you can run the football when they know you're going to run the football, and you can just body blow somebody in the fourth quarter.
Do we go 2018 is the closest? Like that's somewhat. You had the 1-2 punch. That was when Adrian was healthy at the end of the year. You had Stanley Morgan and J.D. Spielman to throw the football to. It wasn't a perfect passing. It wasn't a perfect passing attack. It wasn't a perfect rushing attack.
You had a decent offensive line.
A decent offensive line. It wasn't a top 25 offense, but it was balanced.
No, and they gave headaches to people. That's it. Yeah, you got to go back a ways.
Before that, you probably got to go back to the Bow years.
You got to go back to 14.
Armstrong and Amir.
Mm-hmm.
Is that year?
Yeah. Right. So, a couple of things here. You have On3 reporting. They made contact with TJ Lateef, and he spoke to Brian Munson. And the question mark after his 24/7 Elite 11 interview about, is your recruitment open for business? And kind of a vague, non-committal answer in that interview. We were talking to Michael Bruntz that Tuesday this week, and Lateef says, look, I'm committed to Nebraska. That was the response to On3. He's like, look, there's a lot of media trying to call me recently, but I'm 100% solid to Nebraska. And he said that the school commitment would be a family decision. So there you go. Put to bed. All's well that ends well, right?
Well, we got our pants in a bunch about nothing. Like, I shouldn't say about nothing, but like,
I don't listen. This sounds awful to say I don't care, but dude, he's a 17, 18-year-old kid,
not media trained. And
not only that, but just...
And do you expect him to say no? If somebody comes in with a $3 million offer, I'd say no, because I'm locked in on Nebraska.
Guess what? Elijah Herbel's taking that phone call if there's $3 million offer on the table.
It's pretty well accepted. I mean, whenever Husker targets commit elsewhere, what do Husker fans say? Well, a lot can change between now and signing day.
Well,
and you're not going to give a recruit the same benefit of the doubt that if he's... Well, it's not closed. I'm committed to Nebraska. It's not closed, but a lot can happen between now and signing day to reading between the lines there. Like, I think it was a little crazy, the overreaction to that comment, saying, oh, should Husker fans be worried?
Who's going to come in and swipe the guy? I mean, who's knocking on his door? Is it Oregon? Is it SC? Is it Ohio State? I mean, is it a quarterback factory that's knocking on his door, whispering in his ear? Or is it someplace that, all right, may have a better record than Nebraska, and they're going to shell out more money, but not at that level of playoff or championship? What's the motive? What's going to wind your clock every day? Is it money? Is it greatness? Is it wins? I mean, what's important? Let's talk recruitability. And there are realities for where your program is at and who you're competing against, because it's obvious when you look at a talent like a Dylan Raiola that, man, our team would be great if we got that guy to throw the football. Yeah, the world sees that. And the recruitability part is so key with your staff and your team. You like a guy's film, you get him to campus, multiple times, you develop the relationship, you lay out a plan. That plan is for them to go from A to Z and be successful on and off the field. But what are your chances when it comes to going up against teams that are just at a different level perception-wise and in the win-loss part of this equation? So that is something that I think I applaud Nebraska's full court press. I applaud Nebraska not saying, oh, well, we better wait till we win a game or two before we start calling these big guys. No, be confident in what you're going to do, the plan ahead, and Nebraska and Matt Rule are, and go after who you like, who you want. Simple as that. But the recruitability's a very real thing with where your college football program is living in the moment.
And there's different sides to this, because I think you've seen a guy in David Sanders Jr. who recruitment from Nebraska, by what we're hearing, has probably cooled down. I think that comes down to recruitability. Like, it doesn't matter to being a guy's top 5, you end up being 4 or 5. Like, it really doesn't matter. You might as well cut your losses.
You need to be number 2, because when and if they hit the portal.
And you were able to reach that point with the guy
spot.
in Dawson Merritt.
Yeah.
You might have been 2 for a guy in Douglas U2. Like, an important factor. I think there does come the time of, like, and I don't think we've reached it yet, but, like, you do have to ask the question, like, is Nebraska getting themselves in over their heads? And based on what I've seen this offseason, no, I don't think they have. Because I think Sanders is the perfect example of a guy that I don't think you were going to finish top 3 with him. And you
weren't top 3 with Nebraska a year ago at this time with Dylan Raiola.
Well, who was the defensive lineman from Palatine that committed to Michigan?
Simpson?
Committed to Michigan. Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
It's another guy that, like, late in the process, the recruitment cooled because you realized, hey, you probably weren't going to be 1 or 2. Michigan was really hot on his heels, and he seemed to like Michigan. You cooled down, you focused elsewhere. I don't think you should not try because you don't think you're in a guy's tax bracket, if you will.
Sure.
But I think there comes a time we have to understand when the time is right to get out, and I think I've seen that from Nebraska over the past couple months.
And guess what? They're able to move on because of their communication ability. Mm-hmm. They know where they're at. They're not wasting time. The kid's not wasting time. You move on. You stay cordial with one another. And if things change, you're right there for a phone call or a FaceTime. And that's the way to play it. You just need to be good with your timing. And I think Nebraska is. And you need to do your homework. It's not, all right, what's our top 3? And then, oh, crap. Where do we go after our top 3? Eye that talent, right? Have some keen insight when you put your board together. And I think Nebraska's very detailed, very specific with the depths they go in evaluation. So if they move on from a kid, there's somebody that they like and see as a fit. It's so inexact, you can't promise anything. We'll wind down our What It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Reminder to get buckled up. Driving is a full-time job. Phones, food, friends need your attention when you're not driving. Stop the distractions. Just drive. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office, 489-1240. You have Eric that checks in and says, look, TJ Lateef still has better PR skills than Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, that's been a thing. Being on vacation versus the OTAs, throwing with your new wide receivers. I get it. Totally get it. So big thanks to KG, telling folks to hit that like button on the YouTube channel with Hail Varsity. Tiger Shark Diver lets us know it's 65 days till football season. Man, it's going to be an incredible season, going to be fun, lots of excitement, and we'll check in on some more football. Baseball on our mind, though, when we talk a little bit about the way to make some money on baseball, the old Pete Rose way. Danny Burke going to join us, burksbeat.com, here in less than an hour. And good news for this Hall of Fame class for Nebraska Athletics. Ndamukong Suh, part of the Hall of Fame class. Let's highlight Suh. You need to see more of Suh around Nebraska. Been saying that for a long time. Put the guy, and he's completely earned it, in the Hall of Fame. Hopefully you get that done. The class also includes Jordan Hooper, incredible. You've got Virginia Starr, volleyball from 86 to 89. Emily Wong, women's gymnastics. And Mary Weatherholt, women's tennis. But, you need a big old Suh sideline section and bring him back to Memorial Stadium as many times as you can. Because he's one of those guys that still resonates. Still got Levante doing work. You still got Randy doing work in the league. But honestly, I mean, Suh's kind of your big dude that folks still point to with his NFL career and his time in Nebraska, and it's been a while.
I mean, you could argue best Husker NFL career since ...
Ooh. Dare I go Roger Craig card?
Might be how far back you have to go.
Or Irving Fryer card?
You go Amon Green, but Amon didn't really have the longevity.
Well, he had 8 years. 8 years, like 5-6 Pro Bowls. I mean, I think Amon Green with that Packer offense, incredible.
He's dynamite. Absolutely.
He's awesome.
But Suh made it, was it 12? 12 years in the NFL, 13 years in the NFL.
Something. Did a half year and then went to a Super Bowl.
He got Super Bowl ring. I don't know. He's up there.
And I hope his sack numbers started out on fire and then kind of dwindled. I think he's shy of 70 career sacks.
Well, I mean, he became a real run stuffer late in his career.
No, that's
he's eating up double teams or playing.
Sure, he did his job at an incredible level, and he was the best player. The other guy to compare him to of that ilk in that era is Aaron Donald, and you look at the sack numbers that Aaron Donald put up at the same spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there was
different body
types. There was that
types.
time when they were playing next to each other, correct?
Yeah, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but old Aaron got to eat a lot thanks to Suh. We'll check in with Gary Barnett, Hour 2 on the way. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Hall of Fame coach Gary Barnett with us. And Coach, 4th of July is just around the corner. Media Day is just around the corner. Little downtime. How are we doing this week?
Doing well. We're getting ready to take a family trip to Costa Rica. That's a week away, so just trying to get ourselves ready for that. Just trying to get everybody together to get on a flight and go to Costa Rica.
I've had friends that have traveled down there. Have you been down that direction before?
I have. We've been to Costa Rica once before and just thoroughly enjoyed it. We took a really sort of wild and crazy trip. I mean, we went back into the jungles sort of just by ourselves, and we have one guide, and we roughed it a little bit. I mean, we had a nice place to stay at night, but during the day we were out there in the middle of nowhere and on a river cruise and on a little boat that looked like the African Queen, crocodiles and iguanas bigger than my car on the banks and that kind of stuff. We were in a rainforest riding horses with lightning bolts flashing all around us. About everything you could do. We had a lot of fun, though. It was a great place.
There's jungle time, there's horse riding, there's alligator wrestling, and what? Is there beaches, too, you can go hang out, or no?
Yeah, there are beaches, and then I took surf lessons when I was there. My son and I did some fishing out deep out pretty far in the ocean, and we were on the Pacific side, and he caught it like a 165-pound black marlin. And so, we just had fun. The electricity would go off at night every once in a while, and we'd be at a little beach place having dinner, and they'd have to turn on the generators. And it was we stayed in a place called Tamarindo, which was a surf village. The minute I drove in there, I could tell I wore my pants way too high. And secondly, we raised the average age by 30 years the minute we drove in. So just a lot of young people, surfers, and having a good time. So, but rough. It was rough, a little rough around the edges, but fun.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. I assume it was intimidating, right? Was it intimidating at all, or was it just something that you wanted to experience? And I'm trying to relate it to a college football venue, Coach, and it's a bad stretch, so forgive me.
It wasn't like playing at Camp Randall. It wasn't like that. Trust me. But it had its own intimidations, things we hadn't done before.
What place do you think is the most intimidating in college football? You've seen a lot of spots. What place was just brutal to get out alive from?
I think the toughest venues that I've either announced a game from or coached in. One, I'll tell you, it was always, to me, in the Big Ten, it was always Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa were the three toughest places for us to play. Doing the SEC, I think Tennessee is just a great atmosphere. LSU is a great atmosphere. I did the Auburn, Alabama Iron Bowl a couple times in Auburn. That was a great atmosphere. Always loved going to South Carolina. Georgia's cool. A&M is one of the coolest venues ever, I think, to either play in or to announce a game in. So State College in Pennsylvania, it's out in the Penn State's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's hard to get to. It was always a pain. And then afterwards, it was a 3 or 4 hour trip back to the airport. That wasn't so much of a venue problem. That was a cool place to play and coach. But, I didn't think Michigan was overwhelming. Loved going to Nebraska. Just loved going to Nebraska. Washington's a cool place. But you said you had a list of places that were hard, huh?
Yeah, well, and you hit a lot of them, and EA Sports, their video game drops, so they put out their top 25 list of toughest places to play, most intimidating. A&M comes in at number 1, Bama's 2, LSU is 3. So Nebraska didn't make the list. That's hacked off a few people this week. I've been to Colorado a lot for Nebraska-Colorado games, not as many as you. It always got real crazy. The atmosphere was deafening. And I want your take. You said you loved Lincoln. Nebraska always had good teams. You guys had good teams. So that's a big factor to this intimidation part. How good's the team? But the other side of it, I'm interested, Coach, in what was the experience like coaching against Nebraska in Lincoln for your teams, and how did Nebraska register on that intimidation side of things? I mean, the fan base is pretty cordial to people is what I'm getting at.
No, it's extremely cordial. Never felt intimidated by the fan base at all, and always it was almost like they're too nice. What are they going to do here? Mm-hmm. what are they hiding? As we'd walk through that sort of tunnel through the old locker room, and you're under the stands, and they have ropes up so you can get there more easily, but the fans are all lined up in that tunnel, in that area underneath the stadium, but they were all cordial, and they were cordial when we left. Now, lots of times we left, we didn't win, but even when we won there, it was always great game, you guys are class, great game, that kind of stuff. And it never felt like it was a bitter rivalry from the fan base standpoint. I think our fans were a little more unruly than your fans were when you played in Boulder. But no, and Penn State's exactly the same way. They have the same attitude. We felt when we were there that people were very respectful of the game, respectful of what you do, and about the game that was about to happen or the game that just happened. So both good places. We didn't feel that way about every place.
Well, what places were you treated more hostilely? Did you get guff at Missouri? Because Missouri's got a rep too for being a little cranky.
Well, we got when we won the 5th down there, that was crazy. That was Darian Hagan gave me his flak jacket to wear over my head as we walked out, because you go underneath some of the stands to go back into your locker room. And after we'd won on the 5th down, we had to come back out and go for the extra point, which of course we just fell on. It was a new rule that year. We had to do that. So by that time, I mean, there were things being hoisted from the stadium towards us, and so that was absolutely crazy. But it was more the situation than it was the fan base. Mm-hmm. Camp Randall's hard, and I think, and in Iowa, they're right on you, right on top of your bench and your sideline. Of course, you've had all the pink locker room stuff, and you've had angst over that, and so that creates a lot of anxiety, I think, going there.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. That's nice, Darian, to hand you the flak jacket to keep your above your shoulders safe.
No, he had a helmet, so he gave me the flak jacket, and I just put it over my head. I don't know if anything really hit me, but there were some bottles being thrown.
Coach, I want to talk recruiting off-field, on-field, and as you're building a program with Nebraska, they're going after some big fish when it comes to recruiting rankings, and they're in the conversation. They finished second to a really good linebacker out of Kansas City, but he picked Bama. Nebraska, year 2, 5-7 a year ago, finished second to Alabama. That's pretty good, but it's not what you want as coach, right? You want to go get the playmaker. At what point does the on-field have to start delivering in your program to help out the off-field, the recruiting part? When do they mesh? At what point in a build?
First of all, you can chase all those guys you want, but there's got to be a recruitability factor that you consider. Recruitability means, can we really get this kid? Is this going to be something that we need to chase? Because of course, we didn't have the budgets and we didn't have the money that they have now, and we probably never had the budget that Nebraska did. But how much resource can you actually? How many resources can you actually allocate to one kid or two kids? First of all, it was always more important as to whether the kid became a good player or not than rather how good a player he looked like he could be. You've got to win with the kids that you bring in there. You've got to win, or you don't get a shot at the what you think are the better kids. But you can't sacrifice notoriety by signing a kid. You can't sacrifice what you're going to get on the field. And, many times people would want to know why we're not recruiting this guy or why we weren't recruiting that guy. And we had our reasons. And we had everybody done their film study. We knew what our rankings were. We knew who we thought we wanted and who we thought we needed and how we were going to allocate our resources. And we were somewhat limited. We recruited basically California, Texas, and Colorado. And if there was somebody outside of that area that was interested in us and let us know that, then we would go chase those guys too. But, we want to do our evaluation. We didn't want to use anybody else's evaluation. And our evaluation was more important. And that's why as you choose your coaches to recruit and be your recruiters and the guys that can evaluate film, you got to be careful because you just can't buy into a recruiting service. Okay, we're going to recruit all these guys that are in the top 100. Bill McCartney told me a long time, it's not the ones that get away that beat you. It's the ones you take that can't play that beat you. So your evaluation is more important than any recruiting poll or any recruiting list or what anybody else thinks. So, but then the next step is if you're going to really get the best players, because you're going to lose. We would offer 90 scholarships a year. We'd sign 22. So you're losing, 60 to 70% of the guys you're chasing automatically, and that's just recruiting. That's going to happen. So the 22 you're getting better. They're going to have to play and they have to win for you, so that you can go get another 22 and maybe a little better quality. You don't know.
Coach, when did you guys start winning in the living rooms when it came to the program build?
We always won in the living rooms with Bill McCartney. Bill would win every mother and every kid over, but then you leave. you don't live there with them, and then you're gone, and somebody else is in there. I mean, so many stories of we would leave a house and there'd be a coach parked outside waiting to go in. So we always won most in the living room. I always felt good about where we were in the living room, but that's temporary. Kids make choices for a lot of different reasons. And the key to it for us was always having a champion, knowing who we could talk to either in the school, the kids' friends, girlfriend, coach, somebody, uncle, that would tell you the truth, just what the young man's thinking. And that's really hard to get information about. And we always had to have a champion and who we could call and who we could talk to get a real idea as to whether or not we really had a chance to recruit this guy.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, we'll wind it down when we talk about easing the limits on countable coaches. I think that's a good thing as a teacher and coach. More opportunities to have voices and instruction should be a good thing. What do you think about this, and who does it benefit? What programs?
It benefits the programs who can afford to hire as many people as they want. It's like, everything that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years has gone to benefit the schools with more money and more resources. That's just the way it is. And I understand, I grew up and coached in an area, it's like being in the Depression. We couldn't fly to every trip when we were in the Big Ten. We had to drive within 200 miles. So we had cost containment issues like crazy, and we'd have to go fight for, you could have 4 GAs, we'd have to go fight for the 4th GA sometimes. So I'm from a totally different time of football. So when I look at that, I go, good grief, how do you manage all those guys? And then secondly, athletic directors are just, turning over at night. They can't sleep because they're having to find the money to pay these guys. And, you don't just pay them. You got to provide benefits. You got to do 401ks. You got to do all that sort of stuff. So those things were always restraints on me and the programs I was in. So I don't even know how to handle looking at the fact that you can have unlimited coaches. Go get whoever you want, and somebody's going to pay for it. That's a different deal for me.
What part of the team would you add extra coaching? What specific room?
Oh, gosh. I think that depends on the strength of the position coach that you already have. But offensive line, that guy's coaching 5 guys. A lot of times you have 2 coaches for 5 guys. It isn't really 5, it's 15. Mm-hmm. So I think in the offensive line and probably the defensive front, you need a lot of help in. Receivers, you've always got 15 to 20 of those guys. So that in the secondary. So, I'd say secondary and receivers, offensive line, defensive line is areas that I would really concentrate on.
Coach, enjoy Costa Rica. Have a good time. We'll check in down the road.
You got it, Chris. Great being with you.
Good stuff from Barney. Big thanks to him for his time. Costa Rica, you've been a world traveler. Elijah, you ever been down South America?
No, I've not. No. See, I'm more interested in Panama right now because we talked about the U.S. is playing Panama in Copa America right now.
I thought you were giving a shout-out to Van Halen and their glorious tune from 1984.
Yes, Panama. No, today we are anti-Panama. We're still pro-Eddie Van Halen, anti-Panama. The U.S. is down to 10 men. Tim Weah hit a Panamanian. I don't know.
Panamanian?
Panamanian, yeah, he punched him, so he got sent off.
Was it worth it, though? Was it a good shot?
Not really. It was kind of back of the head. Kind of a shove that turned into a punch. It's a whole thing. So U.S. is down to 10 men right now.
Guys that don't use their hands, We'll check in with our friends from the Common Fan Podcast. Danny Burke on the way. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Excited to talk some Big Red football and the Common Fan Podcast. Be sure to check that out. TJ Burkle and Jeff Langenberg joining us here on Hail Varsity to talk their series, The Reckoning. Guys, good to spend some time. And TJ, nice to chance to meet you. And Jeff also, shout out, man. It's good to look back and discuss. I love this series.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys. Really appreciate that. It's been a fun and at times emotional project to undertake, but it's been great.
Highs and lows.
Well, and that's kind of been the last 2 decades of Nebraska football. Alcohol provided. Let me ask that when you guys sit down.
It's bring your own, but it's encouraged. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Some medicine needed.
Well, did you just start it off strong then, like understanding some of these episodes? Do you go straight into the whiskey? Do you go IPA? 'Cause I'm looking at a presidential.
Do you ease in, or do you just?
I need some advice for the presidential debate tonight of what I'm going to be drinking tonight to make it through that.
Oh dear Lord!
For the presidential debate, I would start early. I would start strong. Yep. I would early and often.
TJ's telling us all to buy an IV. I think so. Well, tell us about the Common Fan podcast, guys. TJ, I'll start with you, and just what kind of spawned this pod and then the series.
Sure. The Common Fan podcast, we just started last fall. We're 3 Common fans. It's me, Geoff, and then our good buddy Matt Owens, who's on the road for work today, so unfortunately couldn't join us. But we grew up in Lincoln together. We graduated from Pius together. Had kind of been talking about doing this for a while. And guys, one of the things that we talk about all the time is wanting to put out episodes that Husker are going to be meaningful to Husker fans, right? So we try not to have it be just 3 guys telling inside jokes about stuff that happened in high school or something, right? Like we're fans, so we can have lots of fun. We can have fun. We just did an episode about the most annoying coaches Nebraska will face in 2024. So like things like that we can do and have fun with. But we also work really hard to make sure it's meaningful content that like we ourselves as Husker fans would enjoy and would be interested in. And so, gosh, we have been kicking around this idea for the Reckoning series, Geoff, probably since before we had this podcast. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, we find ourselves in these conversations all the time, right? Going back to, oh my gosh, I can't believe we fired this guy, or what were we thinking when we hired this guy? And I think underneath that is, some real frustration among Husker fans about how bad it's gotten. And it never, our contention in the series is that it never needed to get this bad. And so just kind of all the highs and lows, and it's been more lows than highs, unfortunately. It's sort of the missteps, the poor leadership, the hubris. I mean, all the things that have gone into it. We felt like, there's a ton of history to go back, and I feel like I've either been reminded of things or learned new things. But also so some of this is to look at the historical record, and some of it, as we've said many times, is to do this therapeutic process. And let's look back. Let's exercise some demons, and let's do our small part to help move the program forward into a new era of broad sunlit uplands.
It's free therapy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
Some people go get a therapist. Some people start a podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Some people drink during their podcast.
That's the way to have it.
Tell me, guys, I want to get your thoughts, because the guy that put us onto this was Brandon Vogel, a guy that you guys are working with. Anytime Brandon puts his name behind anything, I think it means something. He's a guy that I have a lot of respect for in Husker media. What's it been like working with him through this podcast series? And I guess what kind of insight have you gained from him through this process of doing this series?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. Geoff, do you want to jump in?
Well, first of all, it's been an honor. Me coming, and admittedly, we talked about this off air. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, born and raised, but I did come from a Notre Dame household. So the legends of Tom Osborne and things like that in our house were the legends of Ara Parseghian, Lou Holtz, and those types of coaches. So I do appreciate the Husker lore. And the reason I like working with Brandon is because he gives me so much insight into things that I had no idea about. As a Common fan, I'm not one of those people that can tell you who the third string running back was for the 1992 team. Working with Brandon, I get a lot of insight and some education about things that I didn't personally know. So it's just been awesome to just kind of be exposed to him and get to hear his thoughts on all these things that otherwise I'd never have an opportunity to do.
Yeah, it's been, and I agree with Geoff, the honor is a good way to put it. I think I love Brandon's approach because he really dives in, he's a data guy and an analytics guy, but he's also such a great storyteller, and he's really like a college football historian as a hobby, right? And so he's got such a great and kind of unique perspective, and I love his counter read newsletter. All the Common fans are subscribers to the Counter Read newsletter. And so we had him on actually for an episode earlier this year. We've actually had him a couple episodes that were non-reckoning episodes. And as we were talking about this idea, it just kept kind of coming up like, Brandon would be awesome to partner with on this. And I just called him and pitched it to him. And he's like, I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. And so he's just been awesome to partner with and just a really excellent added voice for the series.
I love that. I want to play a quick game here. Schmidt, do you know the third string running back from 1992?
Oh, yeah. So you had Calvin Jones.
And then you had Derek Brown.
You had the Weebacks in 91 and into 92.
Let's think about this.
Scott Baldwin got hurt in 91.
Wow.
And then kind of had some issues. We'll just leave it there.
Had some other issues.
92.
See if I can find this.
I think it was, 90. Frazier was there. So in 92.
I'm trying to think of
year. Because that was a year before LP got there.
I was going to say LP wasn't there yet.
He was a freshman in 93.
Well, I'm just looking here. You nailed the top two with Calvin Jones, Derek Brown, Jason Fisher.
Don't remember old Fish getting a carry.
Jeff Makovica.
Uh-huh.
And then Damon Schmedke.
So
they may have not been.
So I was going to say there wasn't a third string back.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was kind of right.
That's why Jeff doesn't know it.
That's why I didn't know. See, that all makes sense.
Brandon would have known right off the top of his head.
Makovica was a fullback, really.
Yeah, and that was the older brother from Joelster.
Yeah, right.
So yeah.
Wow.
TBA, right? Is where we'll go.
That was a fun little game to play.
Yeah. So I was right there. We're talking with our friends from the Common Fan Podcast. Be sure to check their workout, their series, The Reckoning. TJ Burkle, Jeff Langenberg. Guys, we touched on this series, and it kind of got kicked off June 17th, the post-Osborne era, and all of the ups and downs, falling off the yellow brick road, so to speak, and you dove into to Solich's firing. You talked about Bill Callahan. Love the question, because I've had a lot of buddies that just say, they're not real vocal about this, that Callie could have worked because his recruiting was on point, clearly. Yep. It was all cause in the defense that needed to retool after they lost the Jay Moore era guys. And then moving to July 1st, let's go there. Bo Lever or Bo Lever. That is there's your schism in the fan base with folks that could take Bo and folks that wanted to leave Bo. And I put myself on the side of, we're talking very rough edges, even though he mellowed a little bit. That's to say he's closer to 10, 11 wins than he was 6 or 7, in my humble opinion. So as long as he wanted to stay here, I was good with that. He recruited and developed, and they had pros. They found guys that went to the NFL, a lot of guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I think thank you for that, Chris. On the Callahan one, real quick, that one was really interesting because I think what was discussed, two things that came out that may sound a little contradictory, but Brandon made the point, like, in looking back, especially after what we've been through in the last 10 years, maybe it wasn't as bad as people thought. But then we also put it to Mitch and Brandon, was he one defensive coordinator away from putting this all together? And Mitch's response to that was, I think he was always doomed to fail. If not from the beginning, then certainly by the 2007 USC game. So that one's been really interesting. But I think also, Bo proved himself to be a heck of a coach, but he had a lot of talent from Callahan, right? And I agree with you. I do think, I won't spoil the episode for folks, but I do think Pelini is the most divisive one of these conversations that still to this day for the fan base. I actually think the vast majority of fans were okay with the firing of Frank Solich. They sort of agreed with, we don't want to gravitate to mediocrity. It's just, not hiring the right guy after that. So, but and there's just I feel like, you could probably do a 10-part series on every single one of these guys. I feel like Pelini could be like its own like 15 part. I mean,
it's its own 30 for 30.
Yeah, its own 30. There's so much there with the Pelini era. We won 3 division titles. Played for the conference championship 3 times. Never won fewer than 9 games. But obviously, some of the personality stuff, the off the field stuff. I mean, so
the blowouts.
Much,
the blowouts is what wrecked the fan base because they would get annihilated on national TV in the biggest game of the year.
Yes.
And it was usually Wisconsin going Nebraska football on them that reached for that alcohol again. Back to the starting point.
Exactly. It's all people. We talked about this with someone recently, but that 2014 Wisconsin game, they're up 17-3. They're 8-1 at that point. We're like fringe playoff conversation at that point. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to run away with this thing. And then it was like the team like flipped and Melvin Gordon ran for a country mile. And that flipped the script on the entire Pelini era.
We single-handedly gave Melvin Gordon an NFL contract on that game alone.
Geoff, don't be mad that Melvin it was a bad fantasy pick for you, Geoff. Right?
It's Geoff and TJ with us here from.
Why didn't Melvin fumble more against Nebraska compared to his NFL tenure?
Mostly time with the Broncos. Man, that was rough.
Brutal.
We got him on his last legs. But back to this podcast here, guys. TJ and Geoff again with us, the Common Fan Podcast. Check out their new series, The Reckoning. Episodes dropping every single Monday. They already have an episode on Solich, an episode on Callahan, as we laid out. Bo, Mike Riley, and Scott Frost all coming up in the coming weeks. And guys, I want you to kind of zoom out and look at this podcast as a whole, this entire project. Can you tell me, in the last 20 years of Husker football, through this podcast, have you guys been able to find any common threads of why it hasn't been working at Nebraska?
I have a strong opinion on that. Geoff, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, Teach.
Okay.
Yes, I know you do.
I think, yes, I would say that a couple of the common themes are like you look at, Brandon made the point in, I think it was the Solich episode, 3 different ADs who came in and fired the head football coach within their first, before the first 12 months were over in their tenure. That's not a sign of health, right, in an athletic department. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of an ongoing theme is just this hiring and firing cycle that we got ourselves into. But I would also suggest, thinking about the Callahan episode that we just did, and I did a little write-up on it as well, I would also suggest that like we didn't act like Nebraska, right? I mean, think of where we were in 1997. Obviously, we're at the mountaintop in 97, but even in 2003, we're 2 years removed from a national championship game. We're not that far removed from the Osborne era. I think all of college football still looked at us as the Nebraska that had been, dominating for 40, been good to great for 40 years and had most recently been dominant. You fire Frank Solich, who had just gone 9-3. You better go get your Nick Saban, your Pete Carroll. Steve Peterson hired his 5th choice. Bill Callahan was his 5th choice after hiring or interviewing a bunch of 4 out of 5 of them were NFL guys. And so I just think we saw that, and you could apply that to every single one of these coaching hires. I think Pelini, the fan base was behind Pelini, but he's a first-time head coach. Mike Riley was a total out of left field, not the best fit for Nebraska. Frost was the one that made the most sense in the moment. I think any AD for Nebraska in Bill Moose's position would have hired Scott Frost in that situation. So it's just, that we'll talk about with Evan, why that didn't work. But I think a big thing for me is go get a proven winner. Go spend some money, whether they have Nebraska connections or not. We didn't act like the big boy blue blood program that we are. And that's what's really frustrating. And that's what's cost us.
You scared off any real high-level candidates because you just went to Goodfellas on a 9-win coach, and you've done it twice. That's the biggest thing.
I think that's right, Chris. But don't you think in 2003 you could have convinced some pretty dang good coaches to still come to Nebraska, especially for the right dollar amount? I think
you've mentioned the word hubris before, and in that moment, in that time, you have an AD for all the good he did, and Bill Byrne with, Husker Vision and printing money. Yeah. You also had a guy that wanted to call his own shot. You had a tug of war going on between T.O. and Bill Byrne with who's going to be the coach. Well, T.O.'s gone, and things are starting to get slippage a little bit. And Francione, great, you won at TCU with less, but you don't, in my opinion, you don't punt Frank for Francione. Now, if you could have, I think Urban Meyer was a phone call he made as well. And I think the 9-win thing scared Urban, and he was still in the MAC at the time, pre-Utah.
I'll give you a little teaser that we talked about with Michael Severe. Michael Severe brought up that he said if they had kept Solich, let's say they kept him, he thinks he would have gone 6-6, 7-5 in 2004. So let's say they fire him after that season. Urban Meyer was like that's when he blew up, and I think Florida hired him after the 2004 season. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of like maybe 2003 he wasn't considered to be quite ready for prime time, right? But kind of coming on the scene in 2004. So you could play this what if game forever, but that was a really interesting point Michael made.
Some of the coaches from 2003 were pretty adamant too, just in some conversations. They're ready for a 10-win season or better in 2003. I mean, imagine, in 2004. Imagine Joe Daly not having to throw 37 times a game.
Right.
That's a decent vision.
That's exactly right. It is, and part of the series is, when we say, what if they had never fired Frank Solich? It's not to suggest that Solich would have then been here for 25 years. It's just to say, like, how would every one of these, domino pieces led to another series of events. So even if somebody had been fired a year later or a year earlier, it's like everything could have been totally different. So, I mean, we can go down some rabbit holes here.
Big time butterfly effect, quantum leap time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Guys, while we have you on here and before we get you out, really appreciate you hopping on with us here this afternoon. A couple themes from the week in Husker news that I want to get your guys' thoughts on. The first was one that we had with Mitch Sherman on Tuesday. Is it time to change the tunnel walk music? Classic off-season theme. Number 2, your thoughts on recruiting. Is the sky falling? We can start with you, Geoff.
First off, I listened to your folks' episode when you had Sherman on talking about scrapping the tunnel walk. I'm on board with him. I've said this before, and I thought it was a hot take, but it sounds like it might be a little bit more popular than I thought. I think the song is kind of dated. I don't feel it motivates today's youth as much as it used to. If you want my pick on a song, I was thinking about I was just fortunate enough to be listening to you when I was driving back on the road from work, and I'm trying to think of the perfect song. And you folks, God, what were you guys talking about?
Sabotage.
Yep, you had Sabotage. So I thought the Beastie Boys was pretty awesome there. I thought maybe Intergalactic. If you wanted to go way early 90s and kind of cheesy with it, I don't see anything wrong with Marky Mark, Good Vibrations. I'm going to tell you that much right now.
My God, Geoff.
Student section's going to be wearing their Calvins.
Yep, curling cinder blocks.
Geoff, do you have thoughts on the recruiting class? I'm guessing you're totally dialed in on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Only thing I would say on, and before I forget, guys, if I could do a shameless plug just for the Common fans out there, you can find us on YouTube. Just search Common Fan Podcast on YouTube. And then we're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere you get your audio podcasts, you can find the Common Fan Podcast as well. I was almost going to forget saying that. I wish Matt was on this. He's probably got better taste in music than either me or Geoff. So I don't know that I have song recommendations, but I do. They've got to do something. And I'll admit, like, I'm a child of the 90s. When I hear the same old song, the heart still goes pitter patter a little bit. But then it just kind of flames out, in recent years. And I don't know what to attribute that to. I see people on Twitter saying it's because the players aren't as hyped up. But also, I don't feel like whatever video they're putting up they got to do something different with all of it. So if that's a new song, I think we need to be a little bit open-minded here. If that means a new song, maybe get some player input on what songs they want to hear or what would get them going in the process. Because I think the player reaction is part of it, but also just what they're putting out there for the fans to see and interact with is just not doing it right now. So I'm on board with changing up the tunnel walk. As with a lot of these things, I think if we start winning, then people stop caring about some of this other tangential stuff a lot, right? On the recruiting side, I here's what I would say, and we're as the common fans, we're not going to be anybody's first source for the latest recruiting news. So you guys probably know more about it than we do. But what I would say is, like, I always think it's funny when people just completely are melting down on social media about the latest. I saw the Dawson Merritt kid went to Alabama, and we had a shot with him. But, like, haven't we learned that this stuff, like, never ends? Like, this is, what about the Dylan Raiola example? Mm-hmm. Let's all just chill out. Let's trust these coaches. They've proven to be good evaluators. Look at Jalen Lloyd as one example. Let's just let these coaches evaluate. Let them do their thing. I think they've earned that. And so I just think I don't have the time or energy to melt down about recruiting, but I don't think the sky is falling.
No, they'll get it figured out, and good September. You could have more in the boat.
Exactly.
Common Fan Podcast, subscribe to it. Their series, The Reckoning, is just awesome stuff for Nebraska football fans. TJ Burke, Jeff Langenberg. Guys, awesome to spend a few minutes with you today. We look forward to future episodes. Thanks for checking out with us here on Hail Varsity.
Hey, thanks for having us, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff from our friends with the Common Fan Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, where you can get the Hail Varsity Podcast download, full show, or the segments you want to hear. Give us a reaction, good, bad, or ugly. Justin chimes in, concurs with the Common Fan folks. Tim says Solich and Pelini were both great for Nebraska. Brent said finally made the YouTube, but the radio was awesome. So wherever you want to hear us, Hail Varsity Radio Network or YouTube, we'll take you. Hail Varsity, appreciate you doing that. Danny Burke with us, burksbeat.com and podcast, and Burke's Best Bets, our 540 segment. Danny, we have survived the College World Series. We have survived Game 7.
No Danny yet.
Oh, that hurts. I saw the phone line lit up.
I may have called a wrong number because I just got to a voicemail and it wasn't Danny. It was some guy named Brian, and I don't think that's right. So I'm going to try this one more time.
Well, tell Brian to give Danny his phone. Give him his phone back. That'd work. No, Daddy going to check in with some Major League Baseball thoughts. We'll see if there's any futures. On NBA draft spots. Hurrdat Sports really doing a cool feature. That's going on YouTube on Baylor Shireman, the Pride of Aurora, stud for Creighton, able to go final pick of the first round last night, and they've got kind of a draft day diary, a setup that's airing, has been airing, which is really cool and really fun. And Baylor could throw the football, man. He could play some quarterback, and now he'll be taking his talents to Boston, which is great. I know Jeff Smith is smiling. So we have Danny Burke, burksbeat.com, Pride of Chicago at Danny Burke 5 on Twitter. Danny, what's the good word? Are you loaded up for next month when it comes to July baseball? How are you?
I'm doing good, fellas. Yeah, we're getting into the groove of things. My Cubbies just got a win in extras. It feels like it's been, 2 months since the last time they got a dub. So not that it makes me feel anything better about the team itself, but hey, baby steps, right?
Baby steps are right. You have Atlanta falling 1-0 to the White Sox. Baltimore top of the first. Philly and Miami, which is weird to say, not Florida, in action. You like anything tonight? The Yanks are at Toronto. St. Louis hosting Cincy. Royals are in action. Cleveland minus 115 on the road at KC, and then Detroit is with the Angels here. So any specifics you got going?
Yeah, the one game that I believe first pitch is happening right about now. So if you can still either get it or get a live number, the wager that I made is on the Baltimore Orioles on the run line against the Texas Rangers. Now, I took the Orioles last night. They came through with a 4-2 victory. They're on a 5-game losing streak, and they were facing a sweep. And an angle that a lot of handicappers like is when a team's facing a sweep, especially a competent team, usually want to try to back that squad. So luckily, Baltimore came through in that facet. And now they're getting a Rangers team that just got swept in 3 games, but they're getting John Gray on the bump. And even though John Gray's ERA looks solid, it's a little bit over 3. His expected ERA is over 4, and he's producing a lot of hard contact. I believe his hard hit rate is at about 43%, barrel rate's at about 9%. And opposing him is Corbin Burns, who has been just as tremendous as he was with the Milwaukee Brewers. So the Orioles are getting everything out of him that they expected to get out of him when they acquired him. And Baltimore's number 1 the past 30 days in weighted runs created plus against righties, and OPS, and ISO. So it would be shocking to me if they didn't take advantage against a should-be regressing John Gray. So, yeah, I like Baltimore in this spot. Oh, and really quick, also, the Rangers dead last in all those categories the last 30 days. So, yeah, I think this adds up well for Baltimore, hoping they can win this game by at least 2 runs or more. Other than that, guys, it was kind of slim pickings on the slate tonight. Nothing stood out too much, but that was probably my favorite play overall.
Well, with it being slim pickings on the diamond tonight, Danny, you doing anything? Copa America, the 2024 Euros, are you getting into any soccer action? It's all day.
I can't say that I have actually bet a little bit in terms of the Euros, but aside from that, haven't done anything with Copa. What isn't it? USA's playing against Panama. Is that tomorrow, Elijah?
That's going on right now as we talk. It's 1-1 in the first half. The U.S. has had a man sent off. Tim Weah punched a Panamanian in the face.
Oh, man. Okay, a little bit of action. All right, a little bit of feistiness out there. That's what you like to see when they're playing a little football out there every now and then.
It didn't hurt.
Right, it's just kind of a little brush up, just kind of acted a little bit. But no, I mean, I haven't done too much, but if you got any advice out there, Elijah, I'll gladly take if you've got any strong lean.
I probably should have a strong lean, but I don't. I've just been enjoying the action thus far. I mean, whenever you do look at the Euros, it's hard to bet against France. I know Mbappe's dealing with the broken nose, but they're just such a loaded team. Spain also looks really good. Those are the 2 teams I'm kind of circling in the Euros, but I don't have a strong lean either way. I don't know enough.
Danny, I want to go to Wrigleyville and get your take on the spots to attend. If Danny Burke, BurksBeat.com, is ranking places to go, and it's been way too long. I want to get the fam to Chicago. I want to get to Wrigleyville. Where are you going first? Where's that first beer being had?
Ooh, that's a great question, Schmitty. Well, here's the thing. It really depends on if someone's been there or not. So if someone has not been there, then you kind of got to go with what you know. You got to go with Old Faithful, and that's got to be Sluggers. Now, I wouldn't necessarily per se suggest Sluggers before the game. It's a little bit better afterwards because you have the dueling pianos, you've got the batting cages, you've got good food, and the arcade. So Sluggers is the best overall all-around bar. For a pregame bar, Murphy's is kind of your vintage, Murphy's Bleachers. I'm sure everyone has heard about it. That's a little bit better of a spot for a pregame. Now, again, that's going to get crowded pretty early. So, again, you got to get there a little bit earlier than you'd want to get a pretty good spot. But honestly, aside from that, if you just walk around Wrigleyville, any bar that you see somewhat open before the game, you can't really go wrong in the sense of, hey, if we can get a seat and we don't have to be too crowded and it doesn't look too packed, I'll take that over any bar right now. But, yeah, if it's somebody's first time, Sluggers all the way would always be my first choice of here is what's represented in Wrigleyville appropriately. This is where you got to get the whole 9 yards for everything.
It's Danny Burke with us, his advice for Wrigleyville if you're making a stop out there this summer. And Danny, before we get you out, about 30 seconds here, any plays for the debate tonight?
Okay, let's see. The plays for how many interruptions? Okay, let's put the number at like 75.5. I would take the over up to about minus 150. I think that's a pretty fair price, I'd say.
Okay.
Well, they're trying out new mics tonight, Danny, that cut out when it's apparently not somebody's turn to speak. We'll see if that works or not.
We need shot callers.
I feel like they say that every time, and then they don't really do it, but I guess we'll see what changes.
We need shot callers and 4 to 5 beers. That's what we need.
No, shock. You interrupt, you get shocked. Danny Burke with us, burksbeat.com. Read up, listen, and follow along at Danny Burke 5. Daddy, take care. We'll talk down the road. Be good.
Absolutely, fellas. Have a good night.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, a Thursday. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We will rain expected, at least where we're broadcasting from, so I don't know that it's going to be a grill night. Makes me sad. That said, gear up, whatever your drink of choice is tonight. Debate. Is there I guess if I wanted to put an end to the LeBron-Jordan debate, that's like the one sports debate that just wears me out. I'm annoyed by.
Yeah.
Forever.
Is that the question you want to ask the presidential candidates?
Yeah.
LeBron or Jordan?
That would be my question.
Would it impact your vote come November?
Dude, don't even get me into that.
Well, I'm not asking you to say which way you're leaning. I'm just asking, would that truthfully impact your vote?
Me and Cranack are moving to Ireland.
Can we start a campaign for a write-in vote for Cranack in the November campaign?
No, we're going to start a write-in vote for Clausburn.
Ooh, you know he'd get those Mexico-U.S. relations right.
We hope. Either that or there'd be a 51st state knowing Clausburn.
God, that'd be so good. Is that our next Friday forecast? Do we do the Clausburn presidential debate?
Well, Claus is going to talk, I think tomorrow we're good, about, I'm sure he's going to talk about fireworks, going to Missouri. But we'll need to sneak in with Claus a little bit on his Claus 2024.
That's going to go so poorly. I love it. That's going to go awful. It's going to be great.
What is that going to look like? So we'll talk with Clausburn. He's imaginary and he wears red tomorrow. Bill Dolman, Pride of Fairbury, will be with us. NBC Sports, the professor. Jacob Padilla. We have a Jacob sighting.
It's been a couple weeks.
It's been about 3, and it's awesome that we're going to get some time because I can't wait to talk with him about summer basketball, how that's been going, but also get his reaction to Baylor Shireman and the Celtics.
Yeah, Baylor Shireman, and then we also had Trey Alexander today get signed a 2-way deal with the Nuggets. We'll see where Casey ends up. I assume we'll get some news.
Do you think he gets drafted or no?
No. Well, it's just ended, didn't it, the draft?
I know it started, at 5?
Yeah, Bronny went at 55 to, who would have thought, the Lakers.
Yeah. Hey, Dad, LeBron, we really want you to stay.
Apparently, Bronny's agent was calling around to teams not named the Suns and the Lakers, saying if you draft Bronny, he will go play in Australia next year, so don't even bother.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so he went to the Lakers.
I know he was all the hype coming out of high school, different level than his dad. His dad delivered. So who knows? The kid's just not ready for the NBA.
Apparently, reports are circulating that was a part of the interview process with both J.J. Redick and Coach Hurley from UConn.
Will you draft my son?
No, what is your development plan for Bronny? That was apparently one of the questions they were asked during the job interview process. And who knows how true that is there's always going to be things floating out there, but that's being
nepotism, yes. All right. Check the podcast page out, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity Radio, Hail Varsity YouTube. Back tomorrow. Big thanks, Danny Burke. Big thanks, Common Fan Podcast fellas. Big thanks, Gary Barnett. Thank you, Brandon Vogel. It's Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 with Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.